reading comes from Luke, the 14th chapter. On one occasion when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, give this person your place. And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. This is the gospel of our Lord, and you may be seated. Well, prior to this little thunderstorm that rolled through, this was a beautiful weekend, right? I hope you all got outside. It's Labor Day weekend, and of course, in a town like this, that means the lakes are busy and town is hopping. And oh yeah, has everyone had sweet corn? Yeah, you all had your sweet corn. Good, good. This weekend, I think it's I hate to say this, but it's sort of the last hurrah of summer. Don't throw rotten tomatoes at me. It is. It's sort of the last hurrah of summer. Hey, get out of here. Man, summer is winding down. I hate to tell you this. I dropped off my riding lawnmower at Ollie's today for a tune-up, and I actually said, I want to make sure it's all working properly before I have to put my snowblower on it. Labor Day weekend. It's a great time, of course, but it means summer is coming to the end, and it means it's time for kids to go back to school. This last week, our family, we have a new kindergartner in our family, and so we went to the big open house this week and got them all signed up for activities and those kinds of things. On Tuesday morning, folks, bright and early, buses will start running again, and kids and parents will get up earlier than they've been up in months. And it's going to be a big day. School starts. And I think, folks, today, in our reading, Jesus is talking to those of us who know what school life is all about. Jesus is talking to those of us who know what school life is like. Not just school, but I think especially a certain room in the school. Raise your hand. You remember the school lunchroom? Huh? The school lunchroom, yeah? I don't know about you, but in my day, back in my day when I was going to school, the school lunchroom meant lunch ladies with hairnets. It meant those rectangular slices of soggy cardboard pizza. And it meant tuna noodle wiggle that had sort of a life of its own. Huh? That's what I remember. But I specifically remember two other things about the lunchroom. First, the lunchroom was not simply about lunch. Maybe it just was the school I went to. But I think the lunchroom was about, well, there was something about the lunchroom that had to do with status. You remember that? You remember how important it was who you sat with? Who sat with whom at the lunch table? What boy sat with what girl at the lunch table? Who sat by themselves, huh? Whose mom packed those little individual pudding cups, huh? Or a Twinkie. They were always the popular kids, right? But you remember, at school lunch, it was clear who held status. Who had status? Who was popular? Who was But there was a second thing I remember about the school lunchroom, and it was this. Guys, don't listen to your pastor for a second here. The lunchroom was a place where rules were often broken. Anybody remember that? That's why there were those teachers who were assigned to be aides, lunchroom. They had lunchroom duty to patrol the lunchroom to stop food fights. There were rules were sort of lacking in the lunchroom. It was a bit of a free-for-all. Everyone loved the exploding milk carton act. That was always good for a laugh. The lunchroom was a place where rules were broken. Well, folks, I think Jesus in our reading, Jesus is talking to those of us who know school lunchrooms all too well. You see, first, Jesus, today in our gospel reading, Jesus takes on this business of status. You see, Jesus, way back when, was invited to dinner. The story is a sort of parable, and being invited to dinner way back when wasn't all that different from life, I'm going to say, in a school cafeteria. Now, bear with me here for a second. You see, way back when, in the ancient world, people lived in a culture where one's status was pretty much everything. And just like in the school lunchroom, one of the key places in the ancient world where status was displayed was at mealtime. When you invited the guests of honor to dinner, to your table, someone of social standing maybe, they were seated closest to the host. But those who were less important sat further away, maybe closer to the kitchen. And of course, those who weren't invited at all, they had no status at all. They didn't even matter. So maybe life in our school cafeterias, status was important way back then. And that status was maybe, it was sort of fragile. To be invited to a better position at the table of an important host wasn't simply an honor, it brought with it benefits. Even tangible benefits for your business. It meant more clients, maybe. Simply to be invited to a lower position at the table, it didn't just mean your food came cold. Being seated at a lower position at the table meant your status, it was diminished. Now, folks, it sounds a little strange, but I don't know how different it really is from life, at our schools today. Where you sit, who you rub shoulders with. Remember how obvious in those lunchrooms the pecking order was at school. How important it was to sit with the right friends at lunch. How much it meant to have someone save you a seat at lunch or invite you to that party. Remember how lines were drawn. There were the band guys. There were the jocks. There were the techies. There were certainly seats of honor, and then there were the uncool seats, right? Well, Jesus in our reading has two things to say about this lunchroom pecking order that was part of that ancient life. First, folks, he gives sort of advice, Jesus does in our reading. Don't think too highly of yourself, he sort of says. Be modest. When invited to someone's house, sit at a lower seat rather than place yourself ahead of others. It's the kind of advice I'm going to give Lars this weekend as he starts school. Don't budge in line, Lars. Wait your turn in line. You don't always have to be first. But then Jesus, he offers a second comment in this parable. And it's advice that I'm sure sounded absolutely ridiculous to his audience. His advice went something like this. Don't invite to your table those in positions of power, those in positions to do something for you, but rather invite those who cannot give you anything in return. He says these words, when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame and the blind. You've heard those words. When he gave this advice, I'm sure people in that ancient day, they just laughed at him. Yeah, right, Jesus. Yeah, right. Are you a fool? Huh? You just don't understand how things work, Jesus. You don't understand the unwritten rules we all live by. Rules about power, rules about what's important. Those all scratch your back if you scratch mine rules. Jesus' advice sounded ludicrous, I've got to imagine. Why on earth would anyone waste an opportunity to raise their social standing by inviting those who have nothing to give you, who can do nothing for you, and who typically mean nothing to you? It's just plain crazy, Jesus. But folks, Jesus breaks all those rules. Jesus breaks rules that say who's important and who isn't. Rules that say who is honored and who is shamed. Jesus breaks all the rules. It's as if he seems to say all these crazy rules you have made about who you think is important and who isn't, they're simply ridiculous. And Jesus goes on to break them all. You know this story. Folks, you know we are people who care. You and I, we're people who care about our status. We don't like to admit it, but we are. It was true during Jesus' day, and it was true during our school years. And truth be told, I'm pretty certain the silent pecking order doesn't end when we graduate from school. In fact, I'm positive. You know this. It happens in our workplaces and at book clubs. It's present in the volunteering we do in parking lots as we compare cars among the company we keep or we don't keep, and even, sadly, sometimes at church. It happens just about everywhere. It's just a little more obvious when we were back at school or when we were in the locker room or on the school bus, right? And given that our kids will be returning to school this week, I wonder if it's a great time to consider what our Christian faith has to say about all this. Because I think it does have something to say. As our young people head back to school, I invite you to help me invite them to think like Jesus, to be, well, rule breakers. Don't break all the rules, guys. Always listen to your teacher. But what would it be like to invite, if we encouraged our youth, to invite a kid who seemed always alone to sit with your group at the table? We've all heard that before. What would it be like to reach out to someone who is very different from you, who needs a friend, to invite them to a party or an outing? What would it be like to stop someone from bullying someone else in our schools? I think that would be kind of bold if we could encourage our kids to do that. And I think it'd make a difference. It'd make a big difference. And adults, you know, this isn't just about kids stuff. Jesus wasn't just talking to adolescents. Jesus was talking to people like you and me. So adults, I'd maybe challenge you. What would it be like for you to invite someone you may not know so well, but you know this person is lonely? Maybe it's someone who's going through a hard time, an acquaintance who's been laid off. I don't know what it might be, but what would it be like for you to invite them, just one-on-one, out for a cup of coffee, or to your house? Adults, what would it be like to look at those people you spend time with and wonder, who's missing amongst my crowd? Do all my friends look and act like I do? Are they all of the same class or upbringing or background? And folks, what would it be like, adults, to wonder about who you or your business or even your church unintentionally excludes from the table? And then adults to do something about it. I think that would be bold. It would be really bold. Folks, Jesus invites not only his first century hearers, but us too, his 21st century followers, to consider living differently. He does. To consider breaking those silly rules we've created about what it means to be somebody in this world, to have status, to break those rules about how we value one another, that we might live differently. Valuing one another not because of what we can do, but because we each are children of God. Folks, Jesus was a rule breaker. He broke all the rules, and I think that's what we all want in our homes and in our schools and in our churches. Isn't that what we want deep down? for ourselves and for our children and our grandchildren, to create and nurture a kind of community, a community founded not upon status, but on grace. Not based upon what we can do, but upon what God has already done for us. And that's why we do all that we do, right? Because first and foremost, we have a God who's broken all the rules with us. A God who has given you and me all the good things in our lives, for no good reason, and invites us to do the same for others. Thanks be to God.